I'm Trevor, if you haven't met me yet. I think everybody has. So, kind of, why are we here? I think I mentioned this to pretty much everybody at one point or another, but I had always felt that there was this big need with a lot of these networking events to kind of change up the format a little bit. You go to them, I don't know how many of you have been to these things, but you go to them and you do a lot of talking, you're giving your elevator pitch time and again, and I found it's just really difficult to have a real intelligent conversation with people and really get them interested in what it is you're doing, because everyone seems to be like trying to sell something. So the idea that I had with this was, could we create an event where it was a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate, and a little bit more of a way to actually kind of talk and have an intelligent conversation about the ideas that you had, not necessarily the company you worked for or the product you were trying to sell. And on the website I talked about, okay, well there's this, I don't know how many of you know the story of the origins of Google, but it's an interesting story. And it started out of an argument, and that argument actually that argument between Sergey and Larry, kind of translated into them eventually becoming friends, although it didn't start out that way. At first, they actually hated each other, and it went from that initial, animosity to them realizing that, okay, this guy actually does know something, and they started talking about ideas they had, and kind of snapped the fingers. Eventually, somehow, that translated into this idea for. I want to say that it was Larry Page that had it for saying, okay, well, it's easy to figure out the links going forward on a website, but what about all this other stuff? Can you go backwards and figure out all the things that link to your website? Well, this became this thing called Backrub, which then became this other thing called PageRank, which is really the origins of how Google search works. And I know we have two Google guys in the room. They can tell you a lot more about this than I can, but that's the basis of it. And the thing that has always interested me is, how did they go from hating each other to forming a team and wanting to do something going forward? So hopefully that's what we can sort of figure out and explore here. Hope, if lightning strikes and some of those relationships occur, great. And if not, we'll all consider that we had a good time, had a bunch of beers, and a few laughs, and people got to present. So that's kind of what I had hoped everybody can get out of this, and we'll see what happens. So a couple points I think are sort of useful. Rather than everybody exchanging business cards with everybody else, I thought it would be a lot easier if you just drop your card in the bowl. I'm going to send out an email afterwards, and that way you have everybody's contact information. The other advantage of that is that, as we're discussing these ideas and whatever people are pitching and presenting and going forward, I think it makes a lot of sense to do that in a public format so other people can see it, as opposed to a private one, which is what email is. So it's like, if I get Nicole's business card and we're emailing each other, none of the rest of you have the advantage of being able to see what we're talking about, and maybe you're interested in those ideas. So that's something I think is kind of useful if we have that in a public format as opposed to an email, which is a private one. So we'll see what happens here, but hopefully people end up forming some good relationships, making some friends, as I said, having a couple drinks and having some fun. So with that, I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about the format here. Basically, this is how it works. You get to stand up here in a little place of honor and tell us about whatever your idea is. You can tell us about the idea itself. You can tell us about the problem that you are hoping, or that you've experienced, but you don't necessarily have a way to solve it, and hopefully the rest of us do. You can tell us about a trend that you've looked at, such as Bill Gates said recently at a conference that he believes that in 5 years' time the best education will come online and won't be university-based. It can be something as simple as that, and you don't really know what that means, but you read that in a TechCrunch article or something like that, and that's what you're here to present. So it really can be something as simple as that. You don't have to have this thing fully baked. It doesn't have to make sense. You don't even have to know where you're going with it. But that's kind of what we're all here for, and I think we've got enough brain power in the room that we should be able to come up with something interesting. So anyway, the last point I'll make is, if you think about this, there's a backdrop of kind of economics here that I think is important to note. We talk a lot about, or you hear a lot in the media about people talking about, how are we going to stimulate the economy, or how are we going to create jobs, or all this kind of stuff. I'm from DC, so this kind of stuff, I read the Washington Post all the time. This kind of stuff is like daily news. And it's kind of silly because the politicians, none of them really have a clue how to do this, because most of them have been politicians their whole life. They've never really started companies or done anything else interesting. If you look at it, the amount of So I'm going to butcher the statistic, but it's roughly this. In terms of GDP, investment in startup companies is something like 0.02% going in, but in terms of output for what they contribute to the economy, it's something like 20%. It's this massive, massive multiplier that is generated off of ideas like this that turn into companies that eventually go and pay taxes, and that's how we generate all this tax revenue. So, as much as we're having fun here, who knows what could happen with this? There could be some actual companies that come out of this, and there's sort of this larger issue of economic growth that we might also consider. So, anyway, I won't belabor all that. So the format here is you have 10 minutes. You can use it however you want. You can either just come up and present the problem, present your idea for it. You can do it in 1 minute, you can do it in 9 minutes, but however much time is left, that's when we all get to kind of kick it around. So with that, I will start the timer. I'm going to go first. And stopwatch. Timer. And we are off and running. Okay, so hopefully is that shooting around? Good. All right, so the idea I have that I was going to talk about tonight that you may have guessed is actually about this. The question is, or actually I should start with the problem.